Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome way for you to rub elbows with your favorite podcast hosts here on the Sports History Network, while at the same time rooting for your hometown team this upcoming NFL season. You've been hearing all about our partner, Tailgate Fantasy, the past few weeks. Well, dig on this. Tailgate created a special Sports History Network league for our listeners, so we can put the word fan back into fantasy football together. It's free to join, and if you do so before the season kicks off, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for a free t-shirt from one of our other partners, Home Field Apparel. It's a win-win-win! So hurry up today and head to sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate for all the details. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate.
The contents of this podcast does not represent the opinions of others and is solely the opinions of Harv Aronson based on his experience, knowledge, and research. Welcome to the Total Sports Recall, your source for sports news and topics from a different angle. And now here's your host, Harv Aronson.
Welcome to Total Sports Recall Podcast. This is Harv Aronson, your host. And today we have a special guest. And first, before we get to our guest, I'd like to just say that I am a member of Society of American Baseball Research, SABR for short. They seek to preserve the rich history of professional baseball. My special guest for today is Charles Slavik, who resides in Jacksonville, like myself. He is a member and heads up the Jacksonville chapter. And just a little bit about Charles Slavik before we turn the mic over to him. Charles Slavik is currently working as a data analyst for a financial services company. He's a proud graduate with high honors from the University of North Florida in 2019. He has worked in the corporate world using a data analytics approach to optimize business processes and workflows across a wide variety of platforms. Charles has been a member of SABR since 2013, and in 2020, he founded a chapter in Jacksonville called the John Henry Pop Lloyd Chapter. It serves its members in the Northeast Florida and Southern Georgia area. Charles' research interests are the cultural, societal, and structural influences that have impacted the course of history in baseball domestically and internationally. Charles is also inspired to pursue the use of data analytics in baseball to help coaches improve player development, scouting, and roster or lineup construction to optimize their team's performance. He coached youth baseball at all levels, from T-ball to collegiate summer league baseball. Charles has been married to his wife, Lidra, another SABR member as well, for over 20 years. They have 4 children collectively and have recently been blessed with 2 beautiful grandchildren. So with Charles with us today, I want to welcome Charles to the Total Sports Recall podcast. And Charles, I'd like to say it's an honor to have you on the show. And as I said in your bio, you're a long-standing member of SABR and the founder of the Jacksonville chapter. Charles, could you give our listeners a little more information on SABR and a little background on the Jacksonville chapter, better known as the John Henry Pop Lloyd chapter?
Now, the Jacksonville chapter, Pop Lloyd chapter, was born basically of the COVID virus. I was basically working at home, remotely, had a lot of free time in between. Most of them were contract gigs, so I'd would be working hard for a while, and then I'd be off for a while. So I stumbled upon, I was looking through SABR doing some research for school, I'm sure it was, and I noticed something about starting a chapter, the instructions just for starting a chapter, and that took me off of what I was originally on there for. And I said, we'll find 8 people in your area that are willing to start, and we'll get you up and running. So I just did a search for Jacksonville of existing members, and they all, of course, belong to some group or another, generally because of the nature of Florida. people come down here from other areas to retire, and that's what there was. Some people in a New York, New Jersey group, or an Ohio group, Midwest and Northeast mainly. So got the names and the emails, and with permission, sent out just a generic, hey, we're interested in starting a Jacksonville chapter. Would you guys be a member? We need eight to get it rolling. So then you'd have something nearby to go to the in-person meetings. Because I know if I belonged to the Jersey group, I'd never be able to go to their meetings. COVID, brought along this sort of meeting through Zoom and YouTube or whatever vehicle people chose. But that's just not the same. But COVID took that away pretty quick. But we got the 8, and we started in April 2000. 8 people. It's up to 30 now. And again, it's a lot of people from other groups. And as they relocate down here, they check it out and say, hey, I'll join your group whenever you do something. And we've been limited in that regard. First project we took on was just trying to find a restaurant that was amenable to everybody. And Jacksonville is so spread out that if you picked one that was in the center, it was still pretty far away from the people that were either to the north or to the south of the location. So we had a hard time getting people to agree on that. Baseball games worked out good. We went to a lot of jumbo shrimp games, and we were able to get people at least come out to that more frequently than, or as frequently as the bar and restaurant locations. So that was fun. You could sit there for 2.5 hours, watch a game and talk. And so we had some good members. I'd have liked to have been more active. I was busy trying to do things I wanted to do, but each time I'd encourage or cajole or say, hey, if anyone else wants to do something, even if you've done it in the past in front of other groups, you've never done it before this distinct group before, bring it on. Or if you need help with something, I wanted people to see it as like a blank canvas that they could do whatever they want. Because I ran to 3 or 4 projects, and we might get into 1 or 2 of them. You just never know where they're going to lead. And that part was so fascinating and so cool. I almost got lost in it.
Yeah. So I know I haven't asked you before, does your group actually meet up at a physical location? I know you mentioned the bars and stuff, and I know you do a lot of Zoom online meetings, but are there still meetings ongoing physically, or is it just basically the Zoom
Not
type
yet.
stuff?
Usually either Glenn or myself would send out, hey, we haven't been to a game in a while, or we haven't been to a restaurant. Anybody interested in going to this particular game or whatever? Glenn had tickets. I think I don't know how connected he is with the jumbo shrimp, but he always had extra tickets. So he said, I already have the tickets, just give me a head count. And he would take care of it with the ticket office against whatever his allotment was.
Yeah.
But he seemed
I've been to a couple of
always.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've been to a couple of jumbo shrimp games. I was just going to say, I've been to a couple of jumbo shrimp games, and I've been to tons of major league games. I come from Pittsburgh. A lot of Pirate games. But I had a blast at the minor league baseball. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I'll tell you, it was a different experience.
They have it very tricked out.
Mm-hmm.
It's made for the experience more because the players are transient. They could be here less than a full season. So you really don't want to play on the attachment to Ronald Acuna if he's, going to be just passing through, limited amount of time passing through your town.
Yeah.
He's going to be with the Braves for a while, apparently, but he's not going to be in your minor league town for a long time.
Well, I remember going to a game
but you do see
back
from other teams.
Yeah.
Good players from the other teams. We saw Wander Franco last year, and
no kidding.
Of course, he's a knucklehead, but you could tell the ones that are are going to be something else. There's just something about the way the ball comes off their bat. It's a different sound. And he was not a big guy.
Really? Yeah. A few years back, I remember going to a jumbo shrimp game, and I found out that on the roster, one of their coaches was Mike Easler, who used to play for the Pirates.
I remember him. He's a good hitter.
Hitman. And so I remember yelling at him, "Hit man, hit man!" He was standing at the top of the dugout, and he turned around and saw me, and I waved my terrible towel, and he was laughing. But I know you touched on these projects you work on. So one of your special projects you and I discussed with your chapter in SABR was involved finding the gravesite of one Dick Lundy, who played shortstop for the Backrack Giants in Atlantic City, back in New Jersey. Back in the day when the Negro Leagues were abundant, and Lundy also grew up near us in Palatka, Florida. So I know you've worked very hard on this project. I'd like you to give our listeners a little backstory on this endeavor that you took on and where it stands today.
What started with the naming, we were trying to get a consensus going on who we should name the group after, and some local the Bragan family is big with auto dealers, and they owned, I think, the Jacksonville Sun, the predecessor to the Shrimp. Bill Terry's name came up because he owned a car dealership around here, the Giants first baseman, and seemed to have a good history attachment to Jacksonville. But these guys, Pop Lloyd and Dick Lundy, Pop Lloyd was from Palatka, was born in Palatka and came up here. One of the big flus down there, a fire burned down half the town. And him and his grandmother, I think, moved up here to Jacksonville to get away from that. And he was quickly shuffled away from the Duval Giants to Atlantic City, which was the Baccarat Giants. It was the mayor of the town, I think, wanted some entertainment for the people other than the beach. So baseball team was built, and he took Pop Lloyd, and later Dick Lundy did play for, I think he succeeded Pop Lloyd. But they both had attachments here. Dick Lundy was born here, came back after his playing career, was actually a red cap with the for the city, with an actual red cap. The Jacksonville team was later named the Red Caps. It was the Negro League team, I believe. But he didn't play for that team, but he was a real red cap.
Yeah, if you could explain too what the red cap is. I was trying to understand that so the listeners know what you're talking about.
It's the hat that the porters, the people that would take the bags and I guess take them to whatever car they were stored in, and have people find their seats. They're basically like an usher on the train.
Wow.
Took the tickets, I guess, at some point, checked the tickets. And so he had a pretty, good attachment, I would say. Obviously, it wasn't, Jacksonville's had not a real sordid, but it's, there's an incident recently with race. And so the fact that, the guy was African-American, left the city and then came back and lived here and has next of kin here, which I later found out, really shows a deep attachment here. And I just think he should have been more recognized. Pop Lloyd got into the Hall of Fame back, I think, in the 70s. And it took, he was well regarded in Atlantic City, but almost unknown in Jacksonville. People don't know him down here. So he was a hero. He became a hero. He had to leave to become a hero. And it took a concerted campaign. Satchel Paige got in the Hall of Fame. And of course, they didn't really want him in. In fact, he said something like they were going to put him in a separate wing, and it wasn't going to be like a real Hall of Fame induction. He said, no, I'm not coming in through the back door. I've had enough of that. I either get in the front door or you don't put me in at all, which good for him. And that's how a lot of them, Major League Baseball didn't really want that many, and they didn't want any in at one point. They didn't want that many in. So even a player like Pop Lloyd, who was considered, one of the best to ever play by guys like quotes from Babe Ruth and John McGraw. Of course, John McGraw put his stamp of approval on a lot of African Americans that he saw when they would barnstorm and actually play teams like half the Yankees and half their minor leaguers. Giant with 4 or 5 or 6 major leaguers, and some minor leaguers, and the Negro League teams held their own. In fact, somebody did a whole compilation. That's the part that's fascinated me, the research that goes into some of these things, where they put together, well, how did they stand against the major league teams? Well, let's see how they, when they played them. They were over 500, and people say, wow, they weren't really trying that hard. I would say as an ex-coach and player, BS to that. When you throw you throw a ball and a bat out there and it gets between the lines, people are competing. And competitors don't, quote unquote, let other people win. Heck, I had trouble letting my sons win games against me. And I was a grown man, and they were kids.
There's no argument with some of the players they had. I mean, come on, Satchel Paige is probably one of the greatest pitchers ever. Josh Gibson was
getting guys out
massive
at 50.
home run hitter. Yeah, and Josh Gibson.
These guys were as good as it gets.
Yeah,
as good as it gets. And it must have, there was no advantage back then to being, it's not like now where AAU and Little League and all the youth leagues are, geared towards, the white country club establishment. You need money to play nowadays. All the sports are getting like that. It's terrible. But back in the day, there was no advantage to being white or black or rich or poor.
Right.
Everybody was playing sandlot ball. There wasn't great because the game, they were still figuring out, what the game was all about. The Babe Ruth revolutionized the game because he just decided, I'm not playing base to base, station to station. Look at me. Look at how I'm built. I'm built for power. I'm not built for speed. So he started knocking the ball over the fence, and they said, he's ruining the game. Can you imagine that? No, the fans loved it.
Yeah, and the other thing about Babe Ruth, and maybe you and I know it, maybe some of the younger people don't know, realizes that just like this Japanese player now playing for the Angels, this guy pitched. Babe Ruth was a great pitcher before he became a hitter. So he played both ways.
So I don't get that. David Wells said once of Babe Ruth, 1575, 275. In other words, if he played today, he'd hit 15 home. And I'm like, David Wells either took too many shots to the head or too many shots to his gut. I don't know what it was. Must have been drunk when he said that, because there's no way. I mean, he'd be a different player. He'd be obviously into some of the development, but he'd have, in terms of power and being able to swing a heavy stick as fast as a guy could, swing like a Ty Cobb type bat. He'd have that advantage of strength just because of his build. So he'd have caught on to the same training innovations that everybody else is a party to.
Absolutely.
Except for the fact that he was in an orphanage. He was poor, so he would have been excluded maybe from that. But somehow you crash the gate and you find a way. He'd find a way to succeed. But
absolutely. Well, we got a little off topic, but back to the Dick Lundy thing. Now, I know you had mentioned. That's all right. No, we can talk baseball all day if you want. I'm telling you. And my specialty is research and history, and the history is the best part of any of the sports. Because the trailblazers are the ones that are worth looking at and researching and knowing about. Sports was a much different kind of atmosphere back then than it is today, obviously. But I know you had mentioned to me in our email exchanges and whatnot, there was a part of this Dick Lundy story with his daughter, I think, right?
Yeah, it started with, I was doing research on, obviously on Lundy and how he fit in with Pop Lloyd, and was he as good or not? And I come across this story about this guy that's trolling a graveyard looking for, it was an African-American predominantly gravesite, burial ground. And he had, I recognized the article. He had a picture of Dick Lundy, and it was known that he was supposedly buried in that cemetery. And the problem was that it went into disrepair. They couldn't find the headstone. So he's out in this cemetery, and a local sport feature writer, not a sports writer even, did a story on this guy that was, chronicling all the people that were buried there, trying to get the thing turned into a national landmark. and Dick Lundy's there. So I'm like, dang, this guy's doing what I should have been doing, because I read about him being there. Never. So I found his name and number. I got his number from the guy who did the article, and I called him up and I said, hey, I told him what I was doing. And I said, I'd like to hook up and say, you're doing what I should be doing, dude. And so he was interested in SABR. He was asking me about, joining SABR. And I said, yeah, let's do it. I says, here's where I'm trying to find Lundy to get him recognized by baseball, maybe the baseball team, the Shrimp, and do something on his behalf to help his candidacy. Because it's hard for people to say, well, Dick Lundy was a great player and he's not even known in his own hometown. Now, granted, we have absentee owners. We have the guy that owns the Akron, I forget what their name was, but he owned the minor league team up there. And this was right before, baseball recognized the Negro Leagues based on their stats. So all these forces are coming together trying to push this thing. And I says, well, I got to get this thing done. So I researched the guys in SABR, guy with the Tallahassee chapter who wrote a book on Poplar, I think it was. And I said, do you know anything about Dick Lundy? I said, his name. He said, yeah, we had communications with next of kin. He gave me a number. He said, number's not good anymore. She hasn't answered. It was a different number than I had. I started researching sort of like an ancestry.com type site that gave all the names of kin and where they lived and phone numbers. So I started just dialing all the numbers, trying to find this daughter. And I was quite certain it was the daughter because a lot of things tied together. She commented on a blog called Banished to the Bullpen, who did a story called Who is Dick Lundy? And I'm like, yeah, this guy's speaking right to me. That nobody knows who he is, and he's should be a Hall of Famer. So he does the article. It was well written, well researched, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And at the end, the first comment, because you should never read the comments on any blog, but I do. And so the first one was like, "Thank you for your comments on my dad."
Oh wow!
And I'm like, or something, words to that effect, and posted her name. I think Barbara Griffin Lundy or something like that. And I said, that can't just be somebody posing. What would be the purpose? And so I said, I looked for like a track back to see if it left a email address. It didn't. I went to the guy who wrote. I said, "Do you know this woman's?" Because we're trying to track her down because she is next of kin to Lundy. And he said no. He said no. But I kept on with my phone numbers, and I had one number that every time I dialed it, it was ringing. I used to do collection work back in the day. And I remember one thing is you keep banging that phone until they pick up. You're going to either annoy the heck out of them or they're going to pick up. So about the 25th time, and we had been to the house. I went myself, and that's what I told the guy that was Michael Swain, who was doing the research at the cemeteries. I said, I left a card there and stuff like that. And he goes, no lie. He says, they're not answering the door for you. They're not going to answer your card either. I said, why is that? And I knew what was coming. And he points his hand. He goes, meaning color of your skin. He goes, they think you're the cops or the government. I said, well, oh my God. I said, I can't fault them for that. I see somebody I don't know on my doorstep. I think it's the government or somebody I don't want, like the cops. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. I said, would you go with me? He says, oh yeah, definitely. So he thought it was a big adventure. Right? So we're like, I said Starsky and Hutch, and he goes, no, it's more like Miami Vice, dude. Miami Vice. It's like Crocker and Tubbs. We're going up to the door. So we bang on the door, no answer, but we thought we saw somebody at the curtains. So I go home that night, and I dial the number, and the guy answers. It sounded like a woman, but he said, I'm her brother. And he said something in a way that I was trying to prod him, like, well, have her call me back. And I wanted to give him my number. He wouldn't take it. He says, she'll call you when she's ready. So I'm like, oh, good. She got she is who we thought she was.
Mm-hmm.
So he confirmed
Mm-hmm.
that just by saying that. And as it turned out, she didn't really want to get involved in it because that's what the final outcome was. She did respond to an email, and she said, "I just think it's too late to do anything. They've been beaten down so much, filled with hope
Wow.
or
Mm-hmm.
their own hope that they knew their father was a great player,
Mm-hmm.
and wasn't being recognized, was being ignored. In fact, I said, we have a shot
Wow.
now. There's things going on. I don't know if you follow the stuff with
Mm-hmm.
Major League Baseball, but this is the time to get everybody in SABR. I mean, there was so many people in SABR that were excited about it. That's what
Yeah.
the community of SABR was so great. There's a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Kroc, who's, I think, an anesthesiologist up in Peoria, Illinois, who does this graveyard project that SABR does to actually put headstones on some of these stars that just didn't have them. Either they were indigent or like like Dick Lundy, they had one and it got destroyed. So we were trying to get that done for her, and I explained that to her. Aside from the other things, so maybe we could get a headstone. Do you know the exact location? Because we couldn't find the location.
Wow.
I mean, I had one other a reverend that I think officiated one of the sisters' weddings or the mother's wedding, and I said he would know where the Dick Lundy was buried. I would assume if he was involved with the family at
Yeah.
that level, he would probably know. So I never got. I gave up on banging his number 25 times, but I was going to
Oh my
actually go to the
gosh.
church or get Michael
Mm-hmm.
and go. We'd both go and see if we could get some information. But she kind of shut that down. But everybody was getting excited.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the authors that did famous books about this were like, yeah, I have this number, and we spoke to her 10 years ago, but the trail's gone cold, and she must have just changed her number and
Wow.
wanted to get away from it. But it's too bad.
And so her reservations are just that she thought it was too late.
Too late to do anything, that nothing was going to come of it. I mean, eventually
That's a
something's going to
shame.
come, but you have to keep banging on the doors.
Yeah.
The campaign to get Pop Lloyd elected, Atlantic City did a big they did these dinners every year, fundraising, and it might be somebody you heard of that back in the day. That's when Atlantic City was first building casinos, and one of the big sponsors of these things, who was in all the programs, was somebody that goes by a number more than a name, 47.
Mm-hmm.
No guess?
I've never heard that.
Casinos?
Never heard that.
Casinos, 47. Donald
Well,
Trump was,
oh, really? Well,
yeah,
I know he was involved in a lot of that stuff. Yeah,
through
yeah,
his
yeah.
through his casinos, yeah.
Wow.
So
Huh.
a lot of sports, local sports celebrities, and that wasn't Donald Trump, but obviously he was attached to that
Yeah.
scene in New York, Manhattan, and the surrounding areas, and he was involved in the casino. And Atlantic City was just starting to become involved in that, had just legalized it.
Well, I know he's
So
got
he
a
was
lot going
supportive
on
of
in
that.
Atlantic City. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was no reason for him to. It's like, who is this guy? But I'm sure he knew who it was before.
Wow.
Certainly before I did. I lived in New Jersey. I never heard of.
Well, that's a real shame because it's never too late. I mean, history does not disappear.
Exactly. And they should be opening the doors. The thing is, statistically, and it was one of our better projects. I think Glenn Guzzo got us together. Guzzo, I always say it wrong. Was got us. I don't know if you know the guy Scott Simkus, and the website is seamheads.com.
His name sounds
He put
familiar.
He put up a lot of the data that's similar to what Baseball Reference has. And if you're into the stats, that's like a statistical orgy,
Wow.
to go through those sites. There's so much good information. So
yeah,
he talked about how he got all that stuff together, all the data, and put it together. And one of the more fascinating things he did, which really puts the comparison, like when I say well, he's a Hall of Well, how do you know? I mean, what are you basing that on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Dick
Mm-hmm.
Lundy, he has Simkus has this thing on his site, and Baseball Reference has it. It's called similarity scores. So they
Mm-hmm.
look at the stats that guys had through their career, and they run it through a screen that can look through all the records that are in the file, and they say, who is this guy's career most like? Like he averaged this many at bats, this many runs, the whole line score.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for Dick Lundy, it's so cool. 5 of them are Hall of Famers, and 2 more are going to be. The most
Wow.
comparable guy is Arky Vaughan, wasn't he? He
Oh
was a
yeah,
Pirate,
he was
right?
a Pirate. Oh yes, he was. Yeah,
He
he
was
was
a
a
pretty
Pittsburgh
good
Pirate.
one,
Oh, he was a very
pretty
good
darn good one.
shortstop. Oh yeah.
Yeah, number 2 was number 2, Derek Jeter.
Oh my
Barry
goodness.
Larkin, number 4, Joe Cronin.
Wow.
So as you get further
Wow.
down, it's less of a comp. But 7 out of 10 of the guys are Hall of Famers. Why is this guy not?
Yeah.
For John Henry Lloyd, it was like 8 of the 10 were, and the other. And Altuve might be the 9th. So
Mm.
clearly a Hall of Famer. I mean, everybody is. Ted Trent, who's another guy who is from here,
Mm-hmm.
only one Hall of Famer, but the comps were Bob Welch, Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, or a pretty good pitcher. That's a pretty good
Yeah.
pitcher back in the
Absolutely.
day. So
Yeah,
you
that
had that
Baseball
kind of
Reference,
stuff.
and Football Reference,
It's a
all those
great
reference
site.
pages. Yeah, I use that
All those.
comparable a lot. That's really cool how you
Oh
do
my
that.
gosh.
Yeah, but
And it's
these
funny, like
days,
I play Stratomatic, right?
oh my God,
Go
I
ahead.
remember Stratomatic long ball. I used.
Do you?
I don't know if you remember long ball. I used to play that every
No.
day as a kid.
There was another
Long
one
ball,
where you spun the
Stratomatic.
dial. You had these round cards, and you spun the dial. And depending on how big a slice of pie, the home runs were always on top, 1 for a home run. And so some
Yeah.
guys had like the top of the arrow would barely fit in the space,
Oh my
and some guys
gosh.
had huge. You spun it and home run.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what do guy, a 40, 50 home run guy.
How
But the
funny.
good thing, Simkus, we had on one of our Zooms, and that's what I was getting. This is one of our worst moments. He did
Mm-hmm.
such a great interview, and Glenn teed it up by talking about Stratomatics because he writes
Oh
for
gosh.
Stratomatic. I know, a
Really.
dream job, and so he's a pretty heavy hitter there. So he understands all this stuff, and Simkus was talking about how he put the stuff together basically because it's just something that appealed to him. And that's how I always
Mm-hmm.
felt about the stats part and the part it played in player development is this is something that interests me, but I can't see it interest. I thought I was weird. I couldn't see it interesting anybody else except parents of kids that would benefit from it or something like that. The development part, I just said, well, I don't know if this stuff is going to work, but it's theoretically it's sound, and now it's all the rage. I was involved with a group to the National Strength and Conditioning Association that did baseball special interests for just weight training. Just because back in the day they used to say no, weight training bad, very bad.
Yep.
I had a high school coach that said, if I hear you guys are weightlifting, I'm going to cut you. And I
Wow.
hung out with the wrestlers and the football players,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all weightlifting. And they
Yeah.
said, your coach is crazy. It's going to make you a better player. Just do it. And so I did. And the next year I went out there banging, hits left and right. He says, Slavik, I don't know what you were doing, but keep doing it. After we ended the year, he said, don't weightlift. It makes you muscle bound, makes you crazy, whatever.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of misinformation back then. And
yeah.
Nobody was 100% sure what they were doing because you'd have experts on one side, expert on the other. You just have to do what you feel is right, and if you think it's theoretically sound, you do it. But Simkus said the same thing, and he said in building this thing, and someone asked him, "Well, when did you know you were onto something?" And he says, "I really didn't until recently when the recognition came out." He said, "I was just kind of thought I was doing something. Me and a few friends that were in on the research were interested in," and he got emotional about it. And then that was Zoom. And if you know Zoom, you close down the meeting and you see this little bar go across the screen. It says it's created a download for you. And I looked at it, and the bar went across the screen for about 2 seconds and then disappeared. It didn't get all the way to the end. And I
Oh
said,
no.
it didn't effing download. My wife had gone to bed because she was in on the
Yeah.
meeting, and she says, "Oh no!" And I said,
Mm.
I was like heartbroken because I looked where it
Sure.
parks the stuff. It
Hmm.
parks it on a file on your computer. Nothing. So
Oh
I
no.
emailed them, called them up the next day, said, what happened? What happened? Is there a backup? They said, no, we'll look into it though. We'll let you know. About 2 months later, I saw this announcement on their site about some things randomly happening, and that's not neither here nor there, but that got me turned off to just using Zoom. So I wish you
Hmm.
better luck with this technology, but
Mm.
you have to literally watch everything with that. But we were like, I was enthralled with what him telling us how he went through all this stuff and
Hmm.
some of the ways he just kept digging and digging and digging, sometimes to a point where he wanted to quit. And that's how we all feel about a lot of research and a lot of these projects that we do. Sometimes you
Yeah.
start them and it looks like
Mhm.
this thing's going to flame out, and you
Well,
just have to keep at it, and then you get a breakthrough.
sure. Hmm.
And
You
you
talk
can't
about
give up
stats and
too
stuff like
early.
that, right? I mean, when I look at baseball today, there's so many statistics I can't even keep up with them. I mean,
Yeah.
half of them I don't
Yeah,
even
I have my
understand.
pet ones.
But oh my gosh, I'm back to the days of just walks, strikeouts, ERAs, batting average. Now they got so many different stats. I don't even know half of what they are. But I scratch my head sometimes thinking about some of these guys that are making the Hall of Fame. And it's just like, to me, some of them, you have no business being in the Hall of Fame compared to what some players that are there or should be there. I mean, it
Yeah.
sometimes just leaves you wondering.
Well, that's the thing. They're the Hall of Saints thing. You have to be a good guy, and if you're not a good, which means you have to have kissed up to the sports writers, because if you turn them off, Exhibit 8 is Barry Bonds v. David Ortiz.
Mm-hmm.
David Ortiz, very popular. He was a
Mm-hmm.
politician. He knew how to,
Mm-hmm.
grease the wheel, and he could
Yeah.
joke about doing steroids, and everyone's like, it's crazy, David Ortiz. Barry
Mm-hmm.
Bonds, who, but I knew the day he pissed on Babe Ruth and said, I'm going to stomp on Babe Ruth, that he was never getting in. They weren't going to let him
Yeah.
in, no matter what. No
Well,
matter what.
attitude goes a long way too, and his attitude is
Oh, I know.
just
Yeah.
pathetic. And
Well,
the
you know
interesting thing
what?
about Barry Bonds is if you look at his rookie baseball card with the Pirates, and then at the end of his career, the difference in his body, it's amazing. He was like a
I
toothpick
can
when
tell
he
you right
came up.
now, from the National Strength and Conditioning Association, they were doing all these debates about, and everyone would chime in on that. Now, these are guys that are training and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
the consensus, I'm telling you, the consensus among all these guys with
Mm-hmm.
degrees, because you had to have a degree to be a trainer,
Sure.
at the time said it doesn't make a difference. If anything, it makes it worse.
Mm.
Canseco's career. Canseco would have had a
Mm-hmm.
lot better career if he didn't, or if he stopped a lot earlier. He got all the chicks. He got Madonna, but he's not getting in the Hall of Fame either.
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
good luck to him. He took it too far.
Mm-hmm.
But then you could look at Bonds and say, well, Bonds was more jacked than him.
Yeah.
Barry Bonds, if you look at
Absolutely.
when he was a toothpick, was hitting the
Mm-hmm.
ball just as far
Yeah.
as when he became big,
Absolutely.
Michelin man Barry Bonds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the guys were saying in the NSCA was, it doesn't help. If anything, it'll slow
Mm-hmm.
your bat speed down. I don't know if
Well,
he cracked the code on how to do both. We don't know, because he's
but
not telling,
yeah,
and his
and
trainer's not telling.
you won't find a Pirates fan on the face of the earth that likes that guy. I'll tell you that right now, because he really ticked off Pirates fans by leaving the team. So
I think a lot of
not
other
well
people
liked
were
in
leaving
Pittsburgh.
before.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people were leaving before. So I guess the the moral of the story is neither one of them have won. Well, actually, the We Are Family Pirates were before Bonds came, so they had theirs, but they were looking forward to
Yeah.
more with Bonds and Bonilla and Van
Uh-huh.
Slyke and blah blah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, and we know what it is, ownership, they all left. I mean,
yeah. And the funny thing that you mentioned Bobby Bonilla is, I read a story about him not too
still getting paid.
long back.
Still
Yeah,
getting paid.
that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. That he's long into
Well, you hear
retirement,
some of
but
the.
it's so funny.
Mm-hmm. They say right now that the Washington has a lot of deferred contracts. They're going to be paying guys like Scherzer and
Jeez,
Rodon
it's
for
insane.
another 20 years, another 25 years,
Wow.
because that's how they did it. Is they put it out and the guys were taking it. Some guys would take.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys want the money now, and some guys, no, I'll take it in annuity as long as you adjust for inflation. I'm fine with that.
Well,
That's how the salary cap works in the NFL.
yeah.
The guys get their money. It's just a matter of when, and they can slide it forward, they can push it back. It's like a shell
But
game.
before we get back to the topic, I know we got a little off topic, but just because
Oh,
the
sorry.
baseball historian you are, no apologies needed. But because we were talking about all this, I'm just curious, and my listeners would probably be curious as well, is to know your thoughts on Pete Rose. Does he belong in there or does he not?
Now I'm going to piss you off again, but listen, there's a whole generation of dads who raised their kids and pointed at one Pete Rose and said, "Son, that's how you play this game."
Absolutely.
For what he did for baseball. I mean, come on. And now you have gambling everywhere. Now I get it. When his time came up, gambling was illegal, and the cardinal sin was not betting at all on baseball, but not betting on your team. They're going to forgive some star for doing that because it's legal now. That he just tripped over some administrative thing, and they'll suspend him for a week, and they'll fine him X number of dollars. If baseball is going to be the American game, right, and they want to appeal to people, I know it'll probably piss off some of the diehards, and I agree with some of them. Dale Murphy, dominant player. They shouldn't even make the argument about, well, he was a nice guy. He belongs in on the player he was, not the personality he was, because we don't. In most cases, if we're lucky, we don't hear what kind of personalities they were. And some of them, like Juan DeFranco, I wish I didn't hear what a great personality some of them are, because it's not there. They're not sometimes the best personality. But all I know is a whole generation of dads
was terrible.
I know, and that's for dispute though, because now they say, well, he was a virulent racist, and some say no, he was actually a great supporter. He just had a bit of it, like sometimes people don't understand me because I'm New Jersey sarcastic, right? Well, Ty Cobb was a Georgia peach. I'm not sure that they're too much removed from Jacksonville as far as race relations rating. But maybe some of it was that the environment he grew up in, when he grew up. I don't know. I'm not saying he has to go out there and lynch somebody, but supposedly he was, he played against these guys in the, barnstorming, Negro Leaguers, I mean. And it's not like he was avoiding people or kicking some ass or calling them the N-word or anything like that. I think anyone that were playing in those games was amenable to them being in the game. It wasn't going to happen then. I mean, African Americans got into the game because of, well, they served their country in World War II. And I always used to think, well, what about World War I? Didn't they serve then? I know they were segregated, they were separate, things like that. But shouldn't that have driven the segregation thing, the integration thing away from segregation when they came back from World War I? And then you'd have had guys playing in the 20s. Some guy did a fascinating book that said if they had done that, the Jackie Robinson of the day would have been Pop Lloyd, because he said he was a very popular guy. not the greatest education, but he was a people person. He could have been the mayor of some town. And
Well,
that's an interesting thing. It's speculative, I know, but it's kind of a cool thing to do. Well, if, they had taken the same approach after World War I and integrated the game by the 20s, first off, it would have been great for the game, but and great for those guys. And then they get into all these, well, how many guys would you have had to let in? Well, as many as, the managers thought would be able to help their team. And you'd be getting them in twos, because even in the 40s, if you took one, you had to take two, because who was going to room with the guy? You couldn't let him room by himself. So generally, they were taking him in pairs. And if the guys could play, they eventually played.
Yeah, and if that would have become the case,
settled on the field.
Yeah, if that would have become the case, Jackie Robinson would just have been another great player that came into the league. It would have saved him a lot of trouble as well, too. I mean, for what all he went through. So,
well, he handled it. He handled it great. He handled it great. And if you want to extend it to politics, I've seen people make the comparison. I forget what number he was. 44.
Hank Aaron?
If he had been more like President 44.
Oh, okay.
That's a good one though.
You fooled me.
If his approach was more like Jackie Robinson, he might have been the greatest president of all time. But it was more like Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And I like Muhammad Ali back in the day. I thought, because number one, he was a great fighter. First thing, he was a great fighter. But he turned a lot of people off. My dad specifically says, "How can you like that SOB?" He said the same thing about Lou Alcindor, and I know what that was about. I get what that was about. But I love.
But the interesting thing is,
when he was Lou Alcindor, Alcindor.
At the very end, though, when Ali was in his final years, one of the most respected athletes anywhere in the world. People loved him.
Oh, because of what he did and how he did it, and they weren't ready. I mean, let's face it, white America wasn't ready for that. They're still not. They still don't like that in a player.
Well, and a final thought of the Pete Rose thing, I can tell you, I also have a YouTube channel by the same name of this podcast, Total Sports Recall, and I did a video on the headline. The opening line said, "This is how baseball should be played," shown by Pete Rose. And I showed highlights of Pete Rose, and it got over 1,000 views. People know, and it's probably older people, that remember seeing Pete Rose play. And he played the game the way it was supposed to play. Just like you said, I mean, he was a phenomenal player. And I'm in agreement. I think he absolutely belongs in the Hall of Fame based on what he did on the field.
I mean, he did that as a manager, dopiest thing you could do, because he justified and said, well, if I'm betting on my team, that means I support my team. Can't be bad. Well, it was against the rules. I get it. It was against the rules. But I think the punishment has to fit, and what he did for baseball, I mean, still pretty amazing. The number of hits, the kind of player he was. Like I said, dads all over were saying, son, that's how you play this game. That's how we learned how to play the game, by watching Pete Rose. You hustle everywhere.
Show me one player today that runs out walks. I don't know if anybody has done that since he left.
And I get it. They're going to, each generation wants to put its mark on the game. But I think I think they're kind of agnostic to whether Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame. Like, kids are like, who's Pete Rose? They never heard of him.
That's a shame.
But when they learn the argument, I know. When they learn the argument, we had the most hits of all time by quite a bit. Played for a long time. So especially
Charles,
players know.
Yeah. I was going to say, you asked some of the guys that are in major leagues today, some of the names from pre-40s, and they won't even know who they are. And that's a shame. History is what every Major League Baseball player should know history.
Here's another one. I don't know how far I should take this one, because you're a Pirate fan. Should 21 be retired? Should 21 be retired?
Absolutely. Let me tell you something about Roberto Clemente. He is revered in the city of Pittsburgh.
I know.
People love him still. And I can recall where I was and what I was doing on December 1st, 1972. I know exactly where I was. I know how I was told about what happened. and I was
Yeah.
heartbroken. Still to this day, heartbroken.
Yep.
A super
Yep.
super human being.
Me too.
And just
Me
based
too.
not just
mean,
on
it's
stats,
like,
but for who he was. His character was the
but
ultimate and the character of a player.
I mean, I was a kid back then, and so I didn't really understand that. But that and Thurman Munson, I think I
Mm-hmm.
haven't got over like
Yeah.
either one, and
Mm-hmm.
both of them took me down for a long time. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, as a kid, it's hard to get you depressed for too long because you're a kid and you got the world by the short hairs and all that. But
Mm-hmm.
just hearing that, it was like a piano fell on me. Just took me down,
Yeah.
both of them. And I think
Mm-hmm.
he should be. And
Absolutely.
I don't understand I do know that because I was told this was in the um some of the other SABR members said Major League Baseball doesn't want to do it, but they think it'll take away from Jackie Robinson. And I don't know. I mean, that's like saying Mount Rushmore should only have one, carving
Yeah.
up there, one president. Only one would fit up there. I mean, can we really not honor two people in the whole game of baseball
That makes no
by doing
sense.
something like that? That's going to dilute. You're not going to turn like the Yankees,
Mm-hmm.
where now they don't even have. They're going to have to go to R2D2
Mm-hmm.
as uniform numbers because they
Mm-hmm.
ran out of pure numbers. But they're not going to honor so many people like that. And plus, for what he did, the humanitarian aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
every bit as socially important
Mm-hmm.
as what Jackie Robinson
Mm-hmm.
did. So yeah, I've always been a retired 21 guy for a long time, but that it hasn't gained any traction, it just amazes me.
It's wrong.
It should have been done by now.
I believe that's wrong.
Should have been done by now.
Absolutely. And I don't know why, how they can make the argument that there should be only one player in the history of all of baseball that gets his retired, his number retired, and nobody else.
Yeah,
It doesn't make
and
any
I don't
sense.
agree that I can't see where it takes anything away from Jackie Robinson's legacy that he didn't already have.
Yeah.
If
Mm-hmm.
if more Latinos, maybe because they honor Roberto Clemente, they probably didn't know Jackie Robinson much more than they knew their next door neighbor or something.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know much about him. They didn't probably know much about baseball. And I get it. We have a lot of Latin American players in baseball. So what does that mean? We don't need them? We shouldn't honor a guy because he can't do anything for us as an entity? That almost sickens me at times.
Yeah.
If that's the reason, and I believe that's what the reason is.
Well, let's put a final note on this Dick Lundy story. So is it a dead issue now, or do you think it has a chance still?
I think, and they put such a gap, I don't think he technically would be considered now for another at least 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about 5 years before his name even comes up for a vote. And it comes up with 20 or 30 others. I mean, and I get it, everybody has their favorites, but out of those 30, 20 have no business being in. And again, using Simkus's similarity scores. If you take and how he rates the guys, Oscar Charleston is like the best Negro League player in his rating by far.
Yeah.
And it's the same way they do like WAR. It's something like that to judge how valuable players were. Wins created. So Dick Lundy is like 30th on the list, and you can squeeze 30 Negro Leaguers into the Hall of Fame very easily. But there's probably another 10 or 15 ranked lower than him, some significantly lower than him, that are in.
Wow.
And nobody, I think, ahead of maybe one guy. What's the one guy's name? Beckham, or big home run hitter, was ahead of him. And then it was Lundy. Oh, and the shortstop that didn't play much of a career because he got shot by a guy who I guess caught him hooking up with his wife in a hotel or something. He tried to jump off a second story balcony and broke his leg, got shot in the leg, and then broke his leg jumping or something like that. Willie Wells, I think it was. But
you got some good stories.
I mean, Yeah, that was a guy who had a lot, but it was a shortened career. But we have guys that had short, Sandy Koufax got him on a short but brilliant career. I think that's where they could open the door a little to some of these guys that, or maybe just a second wing that, the guys like Valenzuela that had a mark on baseball, even though it was short-lived. Mark Fidrich, I don't know, guys like that. I know they're not true Hall of Famers as we've always been judging them, but I've always been a big Hall guy. You could celebrate some of these guys somehow, and I'm sure they do. Maybe they have a wing for something for that.
My opinion of Hall of Fame is always.
Yeah, I hope it does come up.
Yeah, my opinion of Hall of Fame
it almost
has always
makes
been
it like
it's. Yeah,
it's supposed to chronicle the game. So even if you put Bonds and some of these other, here's the problem now: the people that are anti-Bonds and have been since he crapped on Babe Ruth, pardon my French, but you have 3 or 4 guys now that were every bit. If you opened your eyes, right, I can see where that guy was doing it. They're all white though.
Oh boy,
it's amazing. Well,
unreal.
I mean, I drop names, but there's a lot of them. You could just pull up a Google search, ask Dr. Google, and how many guys said about this guy? Well, he was Mr. Backney, acne on the back, which is telltale sign among the bodybuilding crowd of use of steroids, overuse, really overuse is what it is. And there are guys in the Hall of Fame, so more than Barry Bonds may have cracked the code. But so if you want to keep your little institution Simon pure, you got 4 guys you got to let out the back door.
Sure.
Just to be ideologically or morally consistent, in my opinion. So if you're going to do one, I mean, do them all, get them all out, in my opinion. Otherwise, guys like Bonds and Clemens. And Clemens, it's when his career was going downhill. I mean, it's hard to bring it back to the level, and he came back to a level higher than he was before it started going in the tank, and that generally doesn't happen, quote unquote, naturally. That I will say. So you have to look at things like that, their career trajectory. Some of them were off the charts, but there were some that were more off the charts. Home runs at a late age. Well, I mean, Hank Aaron exhibited that, and nobody should suggest that. But if you just go by that bit of evidence, well, from 36 to 40, off the charts. Well, from 36 to 40, that's when Hank Aaron blew the doors off Willie Mays.
Yeah.
I mean, he played in a bandbox, and whereas the other guy played in a wind tunnel. I know that doesn't have an effect. That shouldn't have an effect on you. Play where where you're drafted and where you're going to play. If DiMaggio was hitting it off the Green Monster and Ted Williams was hitting in, to short porch in right field in New York, those 2 guys' stats who are already great ball players are going to be markedly different. So there's a lot of factors that can go in. I don't know. You could tee it up and say, well, it's just this and it's just this guy doing that. Hard to tell.
Well, we appreciate
there's
you
a lot
sharing
of
the Dick Lundy story. I know we got way off track, but hey, listen, if any of my listeners like baseball history, this has been a great history lesson. I'm definitely going to have to
do it again.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm definitely going to put your name out there among the Sports History Network because they do have baseball podcasts. And I'm sure they would love to have you on because just speaking to you, you've got a great mind for the history of baseball. You're like me. I'm a history buff. I believe in the yesteryear before I believe in today's current market of sports. The sports history is just the way to go. It's just every sport has such a rich history, and baseball, it's America's game. Still, some may not see it that way, but it still is America's game. So we thank you for sharing that story. And
thanks for having me.
Your information. Oh, wait, we're not done yet. So I want to see if you have any final thoughts for our audience, anything you just would like to add.
The main thing, it is to promote SABR because it's a great organization. All this stuff that I thought I knew baseball, front cover to back. And that was youthful arrogance. But as I got involved in this and just getting into like one aspect of it, I tried to impress this on the kids because I said, if you learn how to do research, just basic research, you're going to be so far ahead of your peers, first of all, in the classroom, and then when you get out in the workforce, because they're always going to be lazy about it. They're not going to do it. And if you just do a little bit of it, a modicum of it, it'll put you so far ahead that you'll seem a little smarter than you are. I'm not the brightest guy that fell off a turnip truck either, but
Right.
I love to do research. I love to keep digging and digging and finding stuff out. And it's just sometimes like, it multiplies like a snowball rolling downhill. It just gets bigger and bigger. And you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed at
You
what
can
you
never
learn
get it all.
and how far it goes. No.
Absolutely. With
No,
sports,
that's
you can
the
always
good
find
part.
something new.
It never ends.
Exactly. One thing that just crossed my mind too is
I want to get
just in the
the
go ahead.
The one story I wanted to get, the part of the Simkus thing was Glenn was a big Stratomatic guy, and I'm playing it all the time. I always talk to him about the fascinating things I found out. So I have the Negro League set, and I'm playing the teams against each other. Well, which is the best team? Like, right, play a little tournament and see who wins. And this one player kept coming up, Biz Mackey. He's a catcher for one of the Negro League teams. So I'm playing the games, and I'm like, this Biz Mackey keeps coming up clutch. I said, he reminds me of Buster Posey. And I'm a Giant fan. You can tell by the poster in the back.
Yeah, see it in the background.
I'm a big Giant fan.
Yeah.
On hiatus because Kapler's there, but once they get rid, I'll be back. So I'm like, he's my favorite player, catcher, shortstop type. The stats were, and so I go look on Simkus' site for who the comparables are for Mackey, and I think who's number 1 or 2, Buster Posey.
Wow.
So the comparables are there. I recognize it just from the card and throwing the dice and the outcome. And I'm like, this guy just comes through and leads his team and dominates his team and the opponents. It's almost like a Posey. And you can almost see it or feel it through the experience.
Yeah. Can you tell us where we can find that site?
That's the greatness of Stratomatic. Oh, Simkus is seamheads.com. The word seamheads, like for baseball, seam heads.
Yeah.
Seamheads.com. It's great. I mean, you'd spend hours on it because it has the regular ball players and, that's a great site. Fantastic.
Well, I'm writing it
site.
down because I am definitely going to be going to look at that.
You will spend some time there.
I'm sure. Now, if we have any local listeners, how would they actually end up joining your chapter? Obviously, they have to become a member of SABR first.
Yeah, you go on the SABR site, and I'm sure that's right on the front landing page. Just look for SABR membership. I would just Google SABR membership, and it'll take you to it'll list the sites and all the different parts, but membership will be on there, or how to join. Generally, it'll be how to join.
For those out there listening that are baseball historians and love baseball, I absolutely recommend joining this organization. One of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the best investments. I tried to give them away.
Yeah. Well, Charles, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on as our very first guest on Total Sports Recall. And we'd love to have you come back.
Tell me how the ratings
one day
go.
Again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For many baseball,
we can make this a regular.
Absolutely. And, for many, baseball remains America's pastime. It's got such a rich history, as I talked about. Great, colorful players.
Yep.
And we already spoke about SABR being a great organization. SABR trying to keep those aspects of our game alive. And I, like you, I'm very proud to be a member of this. Charles, I'd like to give you now the opportunity before we depart. Any parting words?
No, I think that's it. I know I wanted to get Stratomatic in there and most of the stories. I mean, that when I was trying to uplift the membership in SABR, I think I went to all the colleges in this area and tried to interface with the baseball coaches and get their kids involved. And like I said, I was trying to give away. I would say just write a essay on this topic. We had the projected draft, the mock drafts. Submit a first round only. We did first round. And so if you pick the first pick right, you got a point. The second, so you got picked. You got scored on how many you got right, exactly right in the spot they were drafted. And then the tiebreaker was how many points you were off or how many spots you were off in the ones you were wrong. But unfortunately, I won it. But there was a kid that was doing stories on that. Came out of nowhere. He didn't become a member, but we interviewed him. He's on one of the YouTubes. And so early on, that became like a passion of mine. I was trying to get college kids mainly interested in that. And we had
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Hello, football friends. This is Darren Hayes of the Pigskin Dispatch podcast, and I'd like to invite you to the portal of positive football history, Pigskin Dispatch and pigskindispatch.com. We talk about everything that centers around the game of American football, expert discussions, the origins of the games, the great players, teams, and coaches, and more, and some great guests and insights from experts. We have new episodes 3 to 4 times a week, and you can find us on sportshistorynetwork.com, pigskindispatch.com, or your favorite podcast provider.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.